I close. Hello, Michael. Unmute yourself. Hello, Michael. Can you hear me? Hello, Michael. Hello, Michael. Okay. Hello, Philip. Hello, Philip. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, good. Good. So let me connect to Facebook so we can start.
No worries.
Please, I'm connecting to Facebook so we get started. Okay, so please, can everyone hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thank you. Good evening to you, and thank you for joining us on another episode of iMental, a mental health awareness campaign, and I Am Possible Mindset initiative. And tonight on iMental, we are going to talk about how to deal with depression. Depression can be overwhelming when you are in the midst of it. You can feel like you are the only person in this world suffering, And so learning how to deal with depression can be the difference between you and overcoming it or giving in to the symptoms of it day by day. So to throw more light on this, we have in our midst a mental health nurse, and he's been practicing mental health for quite a while. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce you to Philip Abe-Porin. Hello, good evening, Philip.
Good evening. And
how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Yourself?
I'm good. Thanks for asking, though. So we are in your hands, Philip.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, to today's session. I'm glad to be joining you for the first time today, and I'm hoping that by the time we are done, I would have been able to at least share with you some information that would help all of us identify when either we are having some presentation suggestive of depression or people close to us who may be having depression or experiencing that, so that together we can help them overcome the difficulty. So I think you may need to enable me to be able to share the screen.
Okay.
All right.
Can you now?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so like our host has mentioned, today's discussion is on dealing with depression. I've tried to make it as simple as possible since our audience cut across. By the time we are done, everybody will be able to pick one or two things, and that should be helpful to making anybody around us either presenting with depressive symptoms or the likes be able to manage themselves or seek the help that is required. So without wasting much time, I zoom into the content itself to talk about what exactly depression is in terms of the description of it. Okay. So depression is a disorder of the mood, the way we feel and express our emotions towards people around us. That is what gets disturbed when we suffer depression. Now, in that mood, when depression hits, we feel so low. And things that initially or previously were so interested in doing, all of a sudden we lose interest in them. And these two things usually are the marked symptoms of or presentations for depression. So if all of a sudden you feel so low, and then your interest for things that previously you had pleasure in doing them wanes, then of course this is a point to be worried about. We need to be asking what is going on. And so for those, especially married couples, if a partner all of a sudden loses interest in activities of the night, instead of thinking or suspecting that perhaps he or she is getting something somewhere, you should rather be concerned around issues of mood. Now, there are other people who may not show so much of the low mood because they try to mask that with other activities. Some may experience anxiety, others will have distress or feeling stressed or worn out. Others are agitated, feeling restless, unable to actually cope with simple frustrations that they encounter day by day. And we may see others either start drinking, or if they were already drinking, they start increasing the intake. So you realize the person is drinking more than they used to do. Those could be some indications that some things are not so well with that person. Of course, these are not to say that when somebody all of a sudden starts increasing their alcohol intake, it means the person is depressive, but we're just saying that together with other things could be suggestive. For a person to fully qualify for the diagnosis of depression, usually the doctors will be looking at a period of up to about 2 weeks. So you've been having these signs and symptoms for a period of about 2 weeks. That will be enough time for them to be convinced that yes, you may be suffering from depression. However, sometimes the time may be shorter than 2 weeks, depending on how severe the symptoms are. Somebody could, in 2 days, move from low to almost unable to do anything at all, and perhaps that's talking about weird things, including suicidal ideas, that you will not be waiting for 2 weeks before you diagnose a person as having depression. So in such situations, the 2 weeks may not really be followed through. And the descriptions of mood will come to understand it can occur in 3 different levels. Some are mild, and for those mild cases, the person is still able to do almost everything that they used to do. It's just that the speed at which they do them, the attention they give to those activities, if you watch closely, you can tell that something may not be okay. So in most cases, these mild presentations could be dealt with at the general hospital level. But the moderate to severe are the types or the levels where the person's activities begin to get severely affected. So the person is unable to do a lot of things. We'll come to see the signs and symptoms as we progress. So many of those signs and symptoms become clearer and present almost all the time for those people who have severe, moderate and severe depression. And let's look at a few things, some facts regarding depression. I tried as much as possible to get information that will give us a global picture as well, like a local one. Unfortunately, I couldn't come across much of the local. So we may have just to do inferences with a global picture. The World Health Organization puts the number of people in the whole world suffering from depression at about 264 million. That should be about 3%, considering that currently we are told the world is about 7.9 billion people. So if we do that estimation, so imagine we take that number and come to Ghana of our estimated population around 31 million. We should be also hovering around 10 million people suffering from depression alone. Some are recognized and treated, others are not recognized, and people are suffering in it. In terms of how it affects men and women, we are told it's 2 women to 1 man. So if you take 10 men or 10 people in Ghana who have depression, chances are that 6 of those would be women, and then 3 would be men. That's the kind of ratio we would likely to get. Depression has also been identified as a leading cause of disability in the world. Disability in the sense that it makes us unable to do the things we used to do. So eventually we cannot contribute meaningfully to even ourselves, not to talk of our families and communities. And by extension, the whole world suffers from the fact that depression is keeping you down from contributing your quota. The good news, however, is that there are treatments that are available, and they are very effective as well. So if somebody has depression and gets to the attention of those who have the skills and the resources to provide treatment, you will get the best of treatment and you will recover. The challenge, however, is that we are saddled with lack of resources, that is in terms of material and personnel. And it is estimated that because of these two barriers, it's estimated that 76 to 85% of people who have depression needing treatment do not get a treatment. And that is worrying, considering the fact that an untreated depression can actually lead to suicidal ideas and eventually suicide. Even with all these data and facts available, we still have a cross-section of the populates who hold the belief that depression perhaps is just a figment of some people's imagination. So I'm going to take us through a few of the myths and truths about depression as we may come across out there. The first one is that some people consider depression not to be real. But in reality, like we saw from the beginning, it's actually a disease of our brain. And the things that get affected are some chemicals within our brain that helps in regulating our emotions. It's been found out that those chemicals end up becoming too much or too little. And because of that, depression results. So yes, it's a fact that depression is a disease and not a myth. Others also believe that depression gets better on its own. So what's the fuss about treatment? Of course, it is possible that some people get better without treatment. I'm sure a lot of other diseases are there. Some people are lucky enough, their immunity is able to fight even infections and they get better without treatment. But a lot more people become worse or they suffer depression and they don't get the needed treatment. So anybody suffering depression, when treated to find a way to help the person out. Other people also believe that depression does not affect children, it's only adults. After all, how do children even feel? Because if they want food, they cry. They get the food and it's not their preference, they cry. If they are sad, they can decide not to mind you. So what's the point? It's just normal things that they express. But the fact is that depression exists amongst every population, every age group, gender, ethnicity. In fact, every kind of human population can suffer depression. So nobody should deceive anybody with that information that children don't get depression. The last myth I want us to look at is that depression only occurs when something bad happens to you. Of course, when we come to see the causes of depression, we may realize that one of the things that causes depression is actually losses that people suffer and they are unable to resolve them. But that is not the only thing. The first fact up there we mentioned, it is a chemical imbalance, a disease of the brain caused by chemical imbalance, which is completely biological. May have nothing to do really with losses. And there are even other people who suffer depression from causes as yet medicine hasn't been able to explain. So unknown causes can contribute to the occurrence of depression. However, some of the known causes include medications, hormonal problems, medications, prescription and over-the-counter, and even illicit drugs altogether have effects on depression. So what then would be some of the things that cause depression? If we want to find out, we want to ask ourselves. To make it simpler for ourselves, I've decided to classify the causes of depression into three. Number one being biological factors, and these have to do with our physical beings as human beings or persons. The first part is genetic predisposition. And that is to mean that we inherit genes, we inherit things from our parents, our grandparents, in fact, our family lineage. It is passed down from generation to generation. And some of those genes are genes that predispose us, make us vulnerable to developing depression later in life. We also have chemical imbalances, which I mentioned earlier, that there are chemicals in the brain and hormones as well, that naturally they're supposed to be supplied in certain quantities to keep us balanced. But for whatever reason, sometimes they are underproduced, mainly and that leads to the presentation of depressive features. There are times too physical illnesses can form the basis for the development of depression. Take, for instance, somebody having a chronic or a terminal illness, a disease that you know you may not come out of it. So you sometimes have to think about what happens, the worries and all of those things connected to the fact that this is a journey of no return can actually sink a person down further into developing depression. In terms of psychological and social factors, we look at losses that we suffer. Imagine all the disasters that have occurred in Ghana. Some people having to lose everything that they ever worked for and have to start from ground zero. Some people are lucky enough to be able to start from ground zero and build up again. Others, unfortunately, are not able to. And once you are unable to cope with that, one of the things you may likely suffer is depression, and it's understandable. And we must commend that when we had some disasters in time past, not so long ago, mental health professionals put themselves together to provide some psychological support for such people. All those were aimed at preventing victims from developing depression and other related problems. We could also have people suffer from depression simply out of stigma and discrimination. For whatever reason, either your fault or the fact that you have been unlucky to have suffered one fate or the other. People discriminate against you, people stigmatize you, give you names, label you, and completely despise you. You think of yourself, what else is there to live for? And that unfortunate feeling of not being valued by anybody has a tendency of actually causing you to develop depression. And of course, we may not have the data, but if we care to do, people who currently are roaming the streets of Ghana looking for jobs for years and not getting, some of them are breaking down with depression. And it's important family members, friends, find a way to support such people, even with simple encouragement that can help. The last point I want to talk about under the social and psychological factors is when somebody feels that either they've let themselves down or they let society down because there are some standards which we have set for ourselves. Unfortunately, due to your circumstances, you haven't been able to meet them. You feel you're a failure and all of those because your mate that you started school with, perhaps primary school, some are great, doing wonderful things. Unfortunately, you are not, especially for those who are very bright early in life. JSS is very bright. Unfortunately, cannot boast of anything now. They may feel that they are a complete failure. And that feeling is laying the foundation for the development of depression in such people. I mentioned earlier when we were discussing the myth that some of the causes of depression have yet not been known. Somebody suffers from depression, all the assessment points to nothing as the root cause of it. Yet the person has fully satisfied all the requirements for depression. So such people will fall under the category of unknown causes of depressive illnesses. Okay. Now let's look at how we're able to could be ourselves, or it could be somebody close to us. I've decided to put these signs and symptoms separately, or arrange them separately to give us a clearer picture. Usually when we talk of signs, they are the obvious things other people can see about us. So as I sit and I present, unfortunately my video is off because my network is misbehaving, so I decided to off the video. But those who joined earlier, one sign about me will be that I'm wearing a bushy hair. So those are the things you see about somebody. Symptoms refer to the things the person feels and tells you. So when you go to the doctor and say you have malaria, the doctor will pause and ask you, what are the things you are feeling? So describe them to me. And let me decide whether you have malaria or have something else. So if you mention the headache, you mention bitterness in the mouth, and all of that, those become symptoms. Okay, so depression, in terms of the symptoms that you can see on somebody, we have social isolation, which is simply meaning that a person suffering depression usually withdraws from people. They want to be on their own. They want their own company, sitting somewhere quietly, brooding over their troubles. When they are performing an activity, you can observe that the energy with which they use to do such activities has reduced. So they're very slow. If you observe them eating, you see a similar thing. They're unable to eat well, like they used to. Somebody who can clear 3 bowls of banku at a sitting. Now is even struggling to deal with half. And at night, they're unable to sleep. You can see them wake up earlier than everybody. That is usually referred to as late insomnia. And you can a practical way of describing this is usually said the person begins to wake up about 2 hours earlier than they used to. So if you're the type who wakes up at 4, now at 2 a.m., your eyes are open, they can't close again. If you used to wake up at 6, 4 a.m., you wake up and you can't sleep again. And you may see some people attempting to cause harm to themselves, either cutting themselves on their wrist to let blood out, or even attempting to hang themselves and all of those things. So those are a set of signs that people who suffer depression could show to us. Now, in terms of the symptoms, there are things they will describe to us if we ask them. Number one amongst them is a big term, but it simply means lack of interest, lack of pleasure in things that we used to drive pleasure in. So I love to watch football. There won't be a match that I wouldn't watch, even if I have to go miles to go and pay and watch somebody's TV. I will. But all of a sudden, I even seem to forget that there are matches going on. There's a tournament going on. I don't even know. And I even mentioned earlier, if it affects a spouse, it means when the other person is interested in having attention, you switch off. And that could be very worrying to the partner who seem ignored, because if you're wondering what is happening, are you seeing somebody else, and those kind of things. That's the first thing you could see. They also talk about the fact that they feel sad most of the time, feel hopeless, worthless, and some actually feel guilty for things. When they tell you the reason why they are guilty, you wonder where the point is that they should be guilty. Yes, you may have played a role, or perhaps not even played any direct role at all, but in a way, the person feels so concerned that it was out of his fault that that particular thing happened to somebody and all of that. And that guilt is really debilitating. And in most cases, it's such guilt and worthlessness that push people to actually commit suicide, because I feel I'm beyond forgiveness. So the only way out is to go. They also complain about lack of energy or lack of drive, which is manifested in the sign that you see there when the person is so slow in activities that they usually do very fast. In terms of beginning and completing tasks, they are unable to, because they do not seem to have the urge to concentrate on anything at all. So they start and they are unable to finish because they can't concentrate on one thing to the end. In very severe cases, you will have what we call hallucinations and delusions. Hallucinations are feelings that are not real. So you perceive things that other people cannot perceive. You see things people cannot see. You hear voices people cannot hear. You are the only one experiencing those things. And the most common ones are the hearing and sight. In terms of hallucinations or those false perceptions, they cut across, there are different types, but they cut across all the five senses that we have or we know. Sense of hearing, touch, taste, and all of that. Then lastly, we have delusions. And delusions are just like hallucinations, false beliefs or beliefs that people hold that are not in alignment with anything that you can pair the person with. So for instance, this persecutory delusion, it simply means that I feel for whatever reason, people are out to do me in. I can explain why, or I may explain, but the other person listening doesn't see the sense in that explanation, doesn't see the sense in why I think for that reason people are out there to persecute you, people are out there to do you in. But yes, the person holds that belief and is so strong, you can't explain it out. So these are a lot. There may be other signs and symptoms people who suffer depression could present with that have not been covered here, but it doesn't mean they couldn't be part of depression. As long as you have some of these things together with those, a good medical practitioner, mental health professional will be able to come to a conclusion if you have a depression or not. So it doesn't mean all is lost, because there's a way to deal with it. And the number one treatment option that is available is medications. So in severe, moderate to severe forms, the person may need admission and the medications are given, which are very effective in dealing with it. We also have psychological care. This is usually done by trained psychologists. We call them clinical psychologists. But of course, we also have other people who have specialized in what we call talk therapy. So talking to people to solve their problems. They are called psychotherapists, who can also help in treating people with depression. And some counselors can also help with mild to some levels of moderate depression. The social management bit involves linkages with encouraging the person to form linkages with family and friends, support systems that can help raise a person's emotions a bit to lift the person off depression. Now, in terms of spiritual management, it is a case that unless the people who are atheists, but even that, they have something that they revere. And in most cases, having a reconnection with your supreme being has been found to be helpful in people who suffer depression, especially when the severe symptoms are down and they are recovering gradually. Reconnecting with their spiritual beings have been found to be helpful for them. And lastly, as part of what we do in education and early detection can go a long way to prevent depression from ravaging all of us. Now, related to depression is loss and grief. And so I just wanted to spend some few minutes looking at how loss and grief affect us and what we can do to manage it. We'll look at how men express their response to a loss, and also how women express their reaction to loss. And then we sum it up with what we can do to help ourselves or somebody who may be going through a loss or grieving. With men, usually, it's been found that they try to suppress whatever sad emotions, whatever sad circumstances they may be facing. And some will try to divert that energy into doing other things. They get busy working so that their mind is off the fact that they've lost something so dear to themselves. So if you see somebody who has lost somebody dearly and is busy doing some other things instead of joining in the mourning process, it's not because the person doesn't feel, it's simply because that is the path the person has taken to manage it. Also, men feel embarrassed to cry. Like we even see in Ghana, men don't cry, isn't it? So to cry because you lost somebody or you lost something so dear is to mean you are weak, you are not a man, you are not man enough. Men don't cry, and you are there crying. That kind of thing. So even when they want to cry, you won't see them crying. They may go hide somewhere in the eyes of others, no, you won't. So they keep things to themselves most of the time. Unfortunately, others start drinking to forget their problems, as the saying goes. Unfortunately, when you finish drinking or you go to start drinking, the problems wait at the entrance to the bar. The moment you come out, they embrace you, take them home. Sleep, wake up, and the problems are sitting in front of you. Say, okay, let's go. So some men do that. Unfortunately, they don't know that is the wrong way to go. Now, women deal with stress or grief or loss in a different way. I'm sure we have both men and women with us. So we may be thinking amongst ourselves now whether these things resonate with us, or we have observed other people who have suffered, male or female, whether we saw any of these things. So I'm sure we can have time to talk about that. So women have been found to be more expressive when it comes to a loss. They may end up narrating the story over and over and over again to almost everybody that comes. And we see that even play out mostly in our traditional areas or traditions. When somebody loses a family member, any visitor that goes, they have to be narrating the story, that kind of thing. And after narrating, they cry again. They go, another person, another group comes, they narrate, after narrating, they cry again, and that kind of thing. So by the time the funeral is over, in most cases, those people have resolved their loss and they are ready to. And women have also been seen to be more open to seeking help than men. Remember, we said men like to keep to themselves, so you end up diverting their attention into doing other things, so maybe engaging in substance use. Women do the opposite. And you can also find some other women who engage in what we call activities of remembrance. That is, trying to do things that remind them of the lost person. It's a way of keeping them in touch with the person who is gone. They recognize that, but they don't want the person to go. So one way to do it is to do things that they used to do together, or the things the person used to do that excited them. They may be doing that. You may find them going to the grave to go and sit there and talk and all of those kind of things. So activities of remembrance are the things women also engage in as a way of responding to a loss. So with all that said, let's see how we can help ourselves or help other people who may be going through the process of grieving. One way we can help ourselves and others is to, as much as possible, find personal space. Even though we have seen as a collective, male and female reaction to grief and loss, the resolution process is individual. So it's important to find time to process what that loss means to you as a person. And what are the things you can do to move on? So that's at the personal level. If we're supporting somebody going through grief, we are supposed to respect the person's personal space. Yes, we may be wondering or be getting worried if the person seems to be so isolated. But we just mentioned social withdrawal in the case of depression. But we should let the person know that we are there. So you're respecting the space by letting the person know that you are around. If he or she needs you, you are ready to help so that you don't unnecessarily intrude. It is also important we find time to spend with people who are supportive. They could be family, they could be friends, they could even be strangers who are supportive in helping us recover from the loss. And instead of resorting to the use of substances, alcohol, smoking, and all of those things, we'd rather find a good routine for ourselves, a routine that keeps us or makes us consistent in doing things and feeling a bit of satisfaction from those activities. They go a long way to help us to recover faster. And of course, seek help when you need it, because nobody is a Superman. And so when you feel overwhelmed, call for help. Avoid substance use. That is a must. And if the culture says don't cry, don't worry. The culture is not with you when you are hiding somewhere else. So you can create a safe place to go and cry out. By the time you come out, you clean your face. Nobody will know you cried, because crying has a way of healing us. So cry if you must. And there is a phenomenon called anniversary depression. And it's important I talk about it because remember we mentioned as part of women's way of dealing with grief, engage in activities of remembrance. One of them is these anniversaries. So the person died last year, January. So this year, January, is 1 year anniversary, that kind of thing. Some people are unable to see the good or the brighter picture regards the anniversaries of the loss of a loved one. And because they are unable to handle that, they end up reliving the experience as if they just lost the person fresh. And so for people who are so close to the lost person, it is important when that time approaches, as much as possible, whether the person invites it or not, we try to be available. Let the person know we are available to support in case they start feeling any strong emotions, reliving the experience of the lost person, so that we don't have you suffering a repetition of the same experience over and over and over again. That will not be so good. So on that anniversary note, I end our discussion for today. And it is my hope that at least we have picked one or two things from this presentation which we can use to help ourselves, to help friends, to help family, and to help society identify and support people who may be going through any of these difficulties so that they can be back on their feet to contribute meaningfully to the society. So I thank you all for your time. And I hand over to the host to take us through the rest of the meeting.
All right. Thank you very much, Philip, for such education on dealing with depression. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So thank you so much for helping us with such education on dealing with depression or how to deal with depression. Because and with everything you said, I believe one way or the other, everyone suffers depression, if I'm right. Because we tend to face different problems, different difficulties, and it depends on how every one of us handles their problem. So I believe we can all relate to everything you said. Okay, so I think at this time you open the floor for questions and answers. So please, anyone with any question can kindly go ahead. Hello, please, anyone with question?
Yes, please. I have a question.
So much.
Okay,
Yes.
please, if you have a question, kindly raise your hand so you get called, because. All right, free mind therapy. Let's go.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
It's a kind of a good discussion, highlighting the causes, raising awareness about depression. Is kind of insightful discussion, and I believe we can create a wider platform on how to, create much more awareness about such psychological and psychosocial disorders, so that we get the youth and women who are vulnerable to get to know the severe dangers of such psychological disorders. I believe initiators of this Zoom meeting are in Nigeria. And according to research, Nigeria seems to be in Africa one of the highest countries with, mental health disorders, according to research and according to World Health Organization. So I believe we need to broaden such kinds of engagement for the better of those affected. Thank you so much. It was just a compliment, a suggestion for us to broaden kind of this discussion.
Thank you very much, Free Mind Therapy. Thank you. I can see Patrick Loloni. Please,
Okay.
I hope I'm right with your name.
Yes, please. You are right.
Thank you. All right, go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank Brother Philip so much for a very wonderful presentation. And to my question, I want to find out how different is stress from depression? How can we draw the lines between stress and depression? What do they have in common? How do they interrelate? Yes. Thank you very much.
Okay. Both stress and depression, we could say, are related because they are problems of our psychological well-being. That's the relationship, the simplest relationship I can draw. Now, in terms of the difference, for us, stress is usually more acute. It could be chronic anyway. We can have a chronic stress that runs over a long period. But when stress becomes a bigger issue, it's more acute. And the treatment for stress is different from that for depression, in that stress falls within a class of diseases we refer to as depression, anxiety disorders. However, you could have a chronic stress which eventually finds its way into developing depression for the person suffering it. And so in terms of, so I'm trying to see if I can simplify the similarities and differences. So I mentioned that problems. Now with the differences, whereas one is a disorder of the mood, the other is a reaction in most cases to environmental things, which is a stress. Stress usually is a reaction to environmental things and not necessarily biological, but we found in the causes of depression that they could be both biological and psychosocial. And so in terms of the treatment, the classes of medications are also different. Those for depression will be different from those for people suffering from stress. So I think that's how simple I can draw the line between the two of them. If that attempt is okay for you, if it's not, you can let me know so I can add on.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I'm clear with the difference.
Okay.
Okay. So please, there's a question in the chat box. Please, can depression be inherited?
Yes, I mentioned that as more like even the number one biological cause of depression. We can inherit genes from our parents or our family lineage, which then predispose that they make us vulnerable. The inheritance alone is not enough for us to develop depression. So we must have that, which will make, it's more like you're building a house. Inheritance is the foundation. So if the foundation is not strong and you put so much weight on it, the building crumbles. If the foundation is not strong and you don't put so much weight on it, the building may not crumble. So you can have that vulnerability from the inherited genes, but the other factors must be strong enough to knock you down to develop depression.
Okay. Okay. Please, any more questions? Okay. There's another question in the chat box from Portia. How long does it take for one to be treated?
Okay. As a general rule, most medications used in the treatment of mental health conditions usually start working properly. You can see improvement in the patient from 2 weeks onwards. So it means for depression, for you to see that the person is actually coming out of that depressive mood, we have to leave a space for about 2 weeks. That is the general kind of observation. It doesn't, however, mean that some people will not recover faster. Some people can take shorter time to recover. It also means that others may take longer than 2 weeks to start seeing improvements. So it's a mix of things, but if you want to, from 2 weeks onwards, that you start seeing good improvements for people who have been given treatment for their depression.
Okay. All right. Okay, please. So, per the symptoms you talked about, can depression make someone a talkative?
Yes and no. There is a type of depression referred to as agitated depression. So if the person suffers that, part of the presentation will make the person look like he's a talkative, kind of whining, almost having issues with almost everything people are doing around him. He's never satisfied with whatever you do. The slightest mistake you do around him or her, the person reacts. So the agitation and restlessness in there. So such can make the person look like he's a talkative. But talkative in the real sense, no. So a few cases where people present with those kind of condition or additional features together with the low mood, loss of interest in other things, then yes, we can have that agitated depression, which makes the person talk. But in most cases, it's less often seen.
Okay. So please, any more questions? Okay. So I think everyone is okay with everything we've said and talked about.
Yes,
I'm sure. All right, so Philip, we would want to thank you. We'd want to thank you for your time and everything, for your presentation, for the knowledge, for the education, for everything you've done. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thanks to everyone who took time out of their busy schedule. I know there are other African countries here from Uganda, Kenya, which is almost, I think, 11 or 12 a.m., but they are still here with us. Thank you all for your time and your patience. This is I Am Possible Mindset, and this is iMental. It's solely a mental health awareness campaign, and I Am Possible Mindset initiative. We will surely come your way again with another great episode of iMental. Thank you all so much, and have a good night.
Bye.
Nice.
I don't mind. I want to see a marriage counselor if he still wants his marriage to work. I don't know. I'm going to talk.
Bye-bye.
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 Mm-hmm.